So we've had the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. Let's go through and pick out some of the key moments. The race overall wasn't very or too exciting, was it, to be honest with you? The start was very samey. There was only a couple of places that made up, a couple of spots, a couple of dropped. And then the rig incident happened, doesn't it? At lap 7, Lance Stroll dropped it, clipped the inside wall at turn 21 and then into the barrier, and that caused the safety car. And it was a bit of a shame for people that started on the softs, especially Ollie Berman. Couldn't really get the most of them soft tyres early on. Had to pit, and then, yeah, everybody, well, most people that came in went on to the hards. The ones that had to double stack, some of them stayed out, and it sort of cost them dearly, didn't it, in the end? And it was a pretty standard race, wasn't it? It was, well, just one stop. Everyone stopped, or most people stopped under the safety car, and then they went 43 laps on the hards. And I think this is where Pirelli should have really bought the really softest in the range, wasn't it? The C0, because the tyre wear here was practically nothing, wasn't it? And even people that came out on softs against with a massive, you know, difference on people that had run 20-30 laps on the hards, still weren't making massive. It wasn't a massive difference between the two tyres where you thought, you know, they're absolutely flying through the field. It just wasn't really like that, was it? So yeah, I think there's something that really needs to be done there. My driver of the day, Ollie Berman, a P7 finish, and that was absolutely fantastic from him. Surprisingly, the Charles Leclerc picked up the fastest lap of the race, and that was right at the end, so a bit odd to see where that pace came from or why they didn't utilise that early doors. But yeah, he pulled it off at the end of the race. But let's go through and see how each of the teams get on, and we'll start with the race winners. Red Bull, another 1-2, and they've started this season much how they started last season, dominant. This time round though, Max Verstappen was first and stayed first, wasn't he? He was comfortable throughout, on his own throughout this one. The only doubt came potentially if there was going to be a red flag when Lance Stroll went into the wall, you know, because he did hit the Tech Pro barriers, and if they had to reshuffle them and he had pitted, then that, you know, would give some advantage to Norris. But I think the Red Bull was just, it's too good again, isn't it, in race pace compared to everyone else, at least about half a second a lap faster than most. Sergio Perez, it was a nice move on Charles Leclerc on lap 4, and then he was just 2 seconds behind Max Verstappen, and we thought, oh, this could be really tasty. But he got that 5-second penalty for an unsafe release when he pulled out just in front of Fernando Alonso during the safety car. But other than that, it was, yeah, a comfortable P2 just behind Max Verstappen. He finished just 6 seconds behind him, so a good weekend for Sergio Perez actually this time round. I did criticise him last weekend, but I think he did a much better job, a lot closer to Max Verstappen, and hopefully he can sort out that qualifying so we can start alongside him and we actually see a battle between the two of them. Third place, and it was Ferrari next up. Charles Leclerc finished third, and yeah, he had a solid P3, didn't he? He wasn't really troubled by P4. He had a good race, consistent, and a fantastic job from him there. And his teammate, Ollie Berman, on his debut had a fantastic race. My driver of the day as well. He started 11th, finished 7th. He was racy early on them softs. Got stuck behind Haas a little bit, didn't he? And was it Yuki as well at one point, where I thought, you know, he should have probably done a little bit better early on in them, making them moves, making it stick, and really racing up to the front from there onwards. But after that, he did a fantastic job. He pushed at the end when he had Lando, Norris bearing down on him on the softs, and had enough tyre in him and enough confidence in him to push forward. A fantastic job from him there. You know, he's really put his hat in the window, hasn't he, with that performance? He'd be mega proud of that. Only 18 years old, another Brit to get points on his debut. A fantastic job from him overall, and there can be nothing more than proud. Let's see if he can keep that seat for the Australian Grand Prix. I'm not sure about that. Carlos Sainz, fresh off an operation yesterday, was in attendance at the race today, wasn't he? So it looks like he might just be fit for that one. Who knows, but we'll see how it goes from there. After that, we'll go talk about the Mercedes team, and yeah, Lewis Hamilton had another poor race when he started at 8th. He's finished 9th. He stayed out under the safety because if he'd pitted, he'd double stacked with Russell and he would have lost out even more places. He stayed out, ran the best race he could. And again, he was on the softs at the end, but didn't really have the performance difference that you'd think. He'd be slicing through the field, to be honest with you. He was behind Norris, couldn't make any impression on him really. Another weekend where, yeah, Lewis Hamilton's not been happy with the rear end of that car all weekend, and it wasn't really a race to remember either. George Russell started 7th, finished 6th. Yeah, basically just made up the pace on Norris, didn't he? Who again, we'll find out what happened to him, why that was the case. But yeah, he was 5 seconds ahead of Ollie Berman in the end. It was a decent race, didn't really attack, or it was just sort of a normal decent finish in the end for him, which was a little bit odd because we've not really seen, despite how close these cars are behind in qualifying, in race pace there seems to be a bit of an order where they just sort of stay that way, isn't it, with Red Bull, Ferrari, Mercedes, Aston Martin sort of scenario, isn't it? And yeah, that's what it was like for George Russell. Not a fantastic race for them. Mercedes, you know, they seem to be between 3rd and 4th fastest team, don't they, this season at the moment. Yeah, so they've got a lot of things to sort out there. Aston Martin next up, and Fernando Alonso started 4th, finished 5th. I think he had a really good job. He lost out to Oscar Piastri early on, kept Russell behind comfortably. A really solid job, some good points from him. I think he'd be very happy with that one. I think the only downside would be with that battle with the McLaren, but the Aston Martin was so slow down the straight, wasn't he? And that was interesting because Alonso was the one piping up saying, yeah, you're not, to the McLaren's in with a little bite, wasn't he, saying that you guys are not going to pass us. But yeah, he was the one getting slammed on down the straight. A nice move on the outside by Oscar Piastri on him into T1. But yeah, a 5th place finish. Alonso will be happy with that one. Lance Stroll started 10th, and his last race lasted just 6 laps, didn't he? Clipped the inside wall and out into the barriers. He'll be really disappointed with that. It's just not been the race or the season start he'd wanted on that one. Next up, McLaren, and Lando Norris started 6th, finished 8th. Again, his was just really because of strategy. He stayed out under the safety car, and then he was running in P4. Did quite a good job, didn't he, staying there on the medium tyres. You know, he was always going to get passed by the faster lot if the 2 Red Bulls and Charles Leclerc, but a really solid race up until that point. He got lucky with the no action on the jump start, didn't he? He actually did jump the start. He moved and then stopped, but it looked like he managed to stop in his grid box and then get going again, which has saved him from getting a penalty, because it was, yeah, he'd gone out of that box and he was very close on doing that, and he clearly jumped the mark on that one a little bit, but luckily got it stopped in time and got going again and avoid a penalty there. But then after the pits he came out P8 and he just ran there, didn't he? Couldn't close up onto Ollie Berman in the end, and I think he'll be disappointed, but I think that's just purely down to how close he was behind Oscar, and he had to stay out to avoid the double stack. Oscar Piastri started in 5th, finished in 4th place. Yeah, brilliant race from him. A great move on the outside of turn 1 of Fernando Alonso on lap 2. Got stuck behind Lewis Hamilton for a little bit, didn't he, where he just couldn't make the move on him when Hamilton was on the mediums. When that all shuffled and sorted itself out, he was a comfortable P4, a really, really solid result from him. Fantastic race management, and this is really what was his downfall, and he seems to have worked on that, and it's worked really well for him from there, hasn't it? After that, we'll talk about the Alpines, and it's another weekend that's just been horrible. Poor qualifying. Pierre Gasly had a gearbox issue on the formation lap. He started the race but then was out at the end of lap 1. They just thought he was at the back of the grid anyway, and last out of the first corner. I think it just wasn't going to work from him. Ocon, P17, finished in 13th in the end, and I think that's a decent result considering how bad that car is. He's moved up 4 places from his start position, so overall I think he'll be, well, disappointed overall, but reasonably happy where he ended considering where he started. The Haas team, Kevin Magnussen, well, he had a pretty bonkers race, isn't it? 10-second penalty for a collision with Ocon, and he then got a 10-second penalty for gaining an advantage. I think that was on Yuki Tsunoda, that one, off-track pass. But he did a fantastic job for his team, holding everybody up and effectively giving Nico Hülkenberg that P10. I mean, he bridged a gap of about 15-16 seconds, such that when Hülkenberg came in, he pitted and came out ahead of his teammate. He'd held everyone up that much, really, you know, cemented that P10 for Nico Hülkenberg from there. So a real, it's like a two halves, isn't it? Just shafted his own race with his penalties, but was fantastic in doing a team job and getting that team a point from there. We'll go to the Visa Racing Bulls after that. Danny Rick had a sloppy race, wasn't he? P14, finished in 16th. Not a great race at all. It was at the back, and then he had all that spin right at the end, wasn't it? Another weekend to forget for him. Yuki Tsunoda, he was in the points, wasn't he? Start at P9. He finished P14 in the end. That car just didn't have the race pace. He was sort of the block, isn't he, at one point, trying to keep people behind him. He just couldn't stay in the points. It's a bit of a shame for him, because after a really good qualifying session, it would have been nice to see him pick up some points from there. Next up, the Sauber Stake F1. P16 start for Bottas, finished in 17th. Not a great race at all. He just finished way back, didn't he? Zhou Guanzu started last, finished 18th. He again stayed out to avoid the double stacking, and I don't think it made much difference to them, did it? He was, didn't help him at all, did it? Strategy was poor. The Williams team, and it was Alex Albon, who was just outside the points in 11. I think he dropped a place at the start to Kevin Magnussen, which sort of really cost him and suffered a bit in the race, didn't he? He got that damage with getting squashed by Magnussen, lap 14, I think that was. Damaged his front wing, dropped a place to Ocon also at that time. Magnussen getting a penalty for that one at that time, and then he just missed out on the points with a P11. Was racing hard to catch up Nico Hülkenberg for that P10, and I think had he not got that poor start and dropped a place to Magnussen, and also the collision with Magnussen again on the pass really cost him, didn't it? Because without that, I think he would have definitely got in the points and a P10 finish. So he'll be disappointed, because his points were on the card for him today. Logan Sargent, he was started 19th, finished 15th. He was a lap down. Quite a fair bit off his teammate. He didn't really make any massive impression on the race there, did he, at all? But yeah, there we have it. Saudi Arabia's done. 2 weeks time we're heading to Austria, the traditional race start of the season, isn't it? Season opener. So yeah, look forward to that race. It's the one that I kind of really look forward to. Really early start, isn't it, for us here in the UK? But yeah, can't wait for the action to get going there. And again, we've had 2 races dominated by the Red Bulls. Ferrari look comfortable, the second fastest car at the moment, don't they? But no one's really putting any pressure on the Red Bulls for the race wins, or Max Verstappen for the race wins at all. And we're not really seeing the battle in behind that we've seen for sort of that second or last place on the podium, isn't it? Where Perez messes up and everybody else gets in. They're fairly comfortable gaps between each of them, aren't they? Between the Ferrari, Mercedes, Aston Martin, McLaren also. We're not really seeing tight, aggressive racing either from them. Once they sort of get in that positions, they're sort of managing it. So it seems like it's almost a little bit harder to follow, and that's probably a bit strange, because this is why we changed to the ground effects cars, and we're not really seeing it this year as well as we see it, or as much as we've seen it last year. But I mean, it's early on. When we get all the cars, fixing all the little issues that they've got, I'm sure they'll be much closer, and we'll get some better racing from there. But I look forward to Australia. Can't wait for the action to get going there. But thanks very much for watching. Please like, subscribe and comment as always. I'll see you next time.